I think he runs England like a club, not like a national team.
Every England manager goes mad. At some stage, on some varying degree, they go mad.
Could we have a woman managing England?
At the moment, in his head, he thinks this is my last chance, this is last chance saloon, I'm going to do it my way.
He is asked more pressing questions by guys like John and Matt than the Prime Minister gets asked.
Hello, welcome along to High Press, brought to you by William Hill in partnership with the Football Writers Association. I'm Alison Bender, and each week we bring together some of Fleet Street's finest to debate all the biggest football stories. And today we're talking about the England manager Gareth Southgate. Has he over or underachieved? I'm going to get straight into it, and I'm going to be joining in as well. But first of all, guys, let's just talk about how we fit into this kind of England camp. You guys have been going to England camps for so long. I mean, Paul, your first one was, Italia 90?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 33 years ago. Well, it is a lifetime. I was going to say seems a lifetime. It is a lifetime.
So you've seen so many England managers come and go.
I did countless World Cups, lots of World Cups, lots of European Championships. Don't think I missed an England game for about 10 or 12 years, something like that.
Let's have a competition, because you've missed one or two England games, right?
Yeah, I missed one in 2014, and then I think I've missed two in total in just over 20 years.
You guys deserve medals. What about you, Matt?
No, I wasn't in Malta only a month or so ago. So I horribly lose.
But we're going to be talking a lot about Gareth Southgate. So let's just put our cards on the table and what kind of relationship we have with that manager. So for me, I've had him as a pundit on my show. I really like him. I'm going to put my hands up. I remember when he took over, and the mood around the England camp was rock bottom, and I want to talk about that. But are any of you guys kind of in his inner circle? I
don't know that he has an inner circle as such, really. I think he probably has a couple that he gets on really, really well with. But
Who are those guys?
Well, I think David Walsh wrote his autobiography, didn't he? And is obviously, knows him particularly well. But honestly, I think part of the Gareth charm is that basically various managers down the years, previous managers, have been very cliquey. And basically had sort of kind of special relationship with three or four. It's then become a bit of a clique, hasn't it? And it's become, awkward and difficult for the rest. And then what you find is that basically the pack is kind of infighting. You've got a small band of kind of pro. The rest are all kind of battering him because they're not in that clique. It's so obvious to break down from a media perspective. Is it right? Not really, but it's the way it works.
If I was a journalist, I'd want to be part of an inner circle with an England manager.
Have you ever been part of an inner circle? Who is your man?
Well, Glenn Hoddle initially. Glenn Hoddle came in and said, basically, I'm not going to have because Terry Venables was before Glenn, had a very, very tight inner circle of 4 or 5 reporters who, when he was in his fight against Alan Sugar at Spurs, were always on his side at Spurs. And then when he became England manager, he repaid that loyalty by, feeding them information, giving them team news. Hoddle came in and basically said, I'm not going to have an inner sanctum. I'm not going to have anybody close to him. And with Steve McLaren, I'd known Steve for a long time, going back to his Derby days. And he knew the world was against him. This was before the Wally with the Brolly stuff against Croatia. But it was very tight, and when he was going to be, obviously he was taking over from Sven, he got a few of us together, and like John says, that did cause ructions, but if you were on the inside, you didn't care because you were getting a direct line to team news, but that was the kind of relationship, we had with England managers at the time. And I really don't think it's anything like that anymore.
No, Matt, I want to hear your sort of take on things. But I remember when Gareth Southgate came in, Russia, everyone talked about how different he was, having media days, like having games of football, having darts, having snooker, like playing games together. And suddenly, like all the journalists were like, this is great. We're kind of part of the team. But how was he with you?
Yeah, that was driven a lot by the FA as well, though.
Yeah.
The FA have changed the atmosphere around the England camp. Because I started covering England around 2012, and 2016 was kind of the lowest point. I remember. I think a lot of us remember.
Terrible.
But also the atmosphere around it was terrible.
Yeah.
And it was very much them against us. It felt like to everybody, and the FA have been very good with Gareth of creating a completely different environment and trying to relax and take the pressure out of the environment and trying to understand. I think there's an understanding within the England camp now of what we need as a press and what we strive for. And I think that's also helped us to understand what they would rather we tried to respect as well a little bit more. Gareth's been part of that, but I think it has been driven by the FA as well, yeah.
Because he was the FA's guy, wasn't he? Obviously, we had this kind of debacle, didn't we? It was like Hodgson basically steps down after that embarrassment against Iceland. Then Allardyce comes in, 67 days later, and suddenly the FA need someone. They need someone who knows the team. Obviously, he's under 21s. They need someone who kind of brings the spirit back. And I'm sorry, but let's not forget, like, I loved that whole, like, Gareth Southgate, you're the one, and the waistcoats, and everyone was watching England again and absolutely loving it. And I know when we get into this discussion about, like, who has he over or underachieved, I think you can't forget things like that, because yes, there might be a manager who's more tactically astute like Mourinho or Capello, but oh my goodness, did I hate it when Capello was England manager. I was not a fan at all. No, I think you have to look at everything.
Absolutely, right? You have to take it all into account. I mean, the Capello thing early on, everyone, including myself, thought Brian Bartlett had played a blinder and basically got in.
I knew straight away, I have to say. Well, I'd worked with him at Real Madrid. Yeah. And the first thing I said to John Terry, I saw John Terry at Chelsea training, and I went, Fabio Capello, good luck, watch out. And John was like, no, he seems really good. And I was like, I know him quite well from Real Madrid.
To be fair, he lost his job over John Terry.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, he was very good for John Terry.
It was brilliant for John Terry.
He went out on the limb.
Best England manager John Terry's ever had, I would say.
I never got on with Fabio Capello, and I did not like the atmosphere around the England camp under him.
Look, I don't think the players did either. So he was a strict disciplinarian. I thought he was going to improve his English. I actually thought his English kind of improved whenever England got together, because he had sort of kind of a week 10 days working and obviously having to speak a lot of English. But then he went away again, and it regressed back. He never really bothered, I don't think, with the whole English thing, which for me I think was quite a big thing. England managers should speak English.
Do you remember the interview he gave when he said, I only need 100 words of English?
Did he?
That killed him. I remember we were all there, and he said, I know 100 words of English and it's all I need.
Yeah, wow. It was unbelievable. It was so dismissive,
None
wasn't
of them was sorry.
No. And I thought it was a miserable time to cover England. It quickly went sour. The football was terrible. South Africa World Cup was a real low, wasn't it? I mean, the FA had an absolute disaster, didn't they? Basically giving him a contract which they thought was a blinder just before the tournament. Obviously worked out, to their detriment and to Capello's sort of stranglehold on the job. But that period, I think, apart from obviously not qualifying for Euro 2008 under Steve McLaren, was the low point.
I think if we're judging England managers, and there's a quite an old adage in journalism, and especially amongst the journalists who cover England on a regular basis, is that every England manager goes mad. At some stage, on some varying degree, they go mad. Gareth has been in the job since 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're 7 years in, and he hasn't gone mad, which is a testament, because every other England manager on a varying scale does something ludicrous, ridiculous, says something crazy,
And he's had to deal with so much, Southgate. Don't you think
he has to
all
deal
the
with
off-field
more
issues?
He has to deal with far more than football, and it's
social
entirely
media, politics.
unfair. Well, politics.
Yeah, politics.
He's asked more pressing questions by guys like John and Matt than the Prime Minister gets asked.
Absolutely. Shame on you guys. Shame on you.
No, shame on political reporters who don't put the Prime Minister under the same scrutiny that England managers don't get.
No, it's really difficult. And the reason I bring Capello up, to be honest, and I don't want to go too much into other England managers, but it's just that we have to remember how bad other managers have been. Even, Roy Hodgson, as great as he's been and as experienced as he is, like, that was a really low period. And we have to remember that. And Sam Allardyce, that was obviously incredibly embarrassing for England as well. So for me, yes, Gareth Southgate did bring the joy back. I enjoyed watching England again. I really loved that tournament. I was in Russia. It was an enjoyable tournament, and I felt like it was no shame to lose out to Croatia. We won on penalties against Colombia. That was massive. That felt like winning a World Cup to me, to win a penalty shootout. But I think a lot of the criticism levelled at Gareth Southgate is, in-game tactics, defensive-minded, perhaps. Substitutions, tactical awareness generally. Is that fair, do you think?
And I think there's a degree where he's not what I would necessarily call a front foot manager. I think that he's a little bit safety first, and I think he has struggled. And listen, better managers than Gareth Southgate have struggled in switching in game.
Yeah.
I think there's only probably a handful of managers you can go, right, would I trust that manager to make an instant change, a substitution, a tactical variation that can change a game, even at especially at international level.
Because it's all small margins, isn't it? Like if you think about it. So to me, like I said, losing out to Croatia, I think they were a really decent side in that World Cup. I don't think that's terrible. I think losing out on penalties at Euro 2020, honestly, I know that some people say like he shouldn't have got 2 young players to take a penalty. To be honest with you, if those players had put it away, they would say he's a genius because young players don't feel pressure, right? Don't you think it's small margins?
Yeah, it is.
And similarly with the Harry Kane penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it goes down to 3 games, doesn't it? Croatia, the final, Euro 2020 final with Italy, and then indeed the quarterfinal with France. In those 3 games, I think he underachieved. And I lay my cards on the table. It's pretty obvious, but I'm pretty pro Gareth. But in those 3 games, I do think you go back to the Croatia game. We're 1-0 up at half time. Everyone can see that Croatia are suddenly overrunning. They've tweaked it in midfield. They've changed it in midfield. He needed to react and then change it either tactically or from a personnel point of view. Similarly, with Italy, England was so on top in that first half. And again, you kind of change it to reinforce the superiority when the tide begins to turn a little bit. With France, I thought England were excellent in that game, unlucky to lose. But then I don't know that you can reproach Harry Kane. I love Harry Kane so much. I think he's England's, such a great player for England. I think he's fabulous, and I felt so sorry for him. But again, I wonder whether England playing so well, particularly when they get it back to 1-1, you think, what can he do? What can he sort of kind of change? And I think tactically, from a tactical point of view, if you have someone like a Guardiola, can Guardiola really make that much impact? Not really, because you can only pick a certain amount of players. You can only do this with the squad, and basically you're always going to win the vast majority of your qualifiers, and you're going to qualify for major tournaments. We've got a great squad. But what the difference is between, a Gareth Southgate and maybe a more tactically astute manager is you make the changes to win the game.
The France game, I thought he got his starting lineup wrong. Rashford was the top scorer in the tournament for us. I can't believe he didn't start him. And then I think his first sub was Sterling. Sterling, who and he had 1 training session or even no training. He'd gone home, come back and not had a training session or just trained the very last training session. And he brought him on ahead of Rashford, which I still can't really get my head around. I actually thought that Southgate got away with not much criticism from that France game because we actually played well. I actually thought there's quite a lot you could pull apart from that France game. Harry Maguire, I think, made an error, and there's the whole Harry Maguire debate around that tournament. So I think he got a little bit of a pass on that one, if I'm honest with you. I actually thought he overachieved in Russia. If you look back to what that squad was in Russia, there's quite a lot of players now where you think, crikey, was he in the England squad? Welbeck was part of the squad. Who else was part of the squad? I think Lingard was part of the squad. Yeah. And you look back at that squad then and you think, actually, to get that far with that squad was really something. And particularly as they were breaking down barriers in that tournament. As you said, it was the penalty shootout. It was getting to a certain stage in tournaments. They were doing stuff that England hadn't done for a very long time. So they were making a lot of progress. So I can forgive them completely and forgive Gareth completely if in that Croatia game there were points. But since then, I'd have just liked to have seen a little bit, even with the Euros.
The Euro final, yeah.
I'd just
that
like to have seen a little bit more. That felt like the biggest
opportunity we've had, right, to win something.
Yeah, I think there was a real opportunity there. And it was essentially a home tournament, which, we're probably going to have that luxury again coming up in the future. But again, a home tournament, Wembley, it was such an opportunity. And I do think it's one that passed us up.
But he said he was defensive for a reason because of all these conceded goals at the World Cup. But it felt like we just had so much attacking flair. We could have really run that game. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that comes back to my point about he's not necessarily a front foot manager.
Yeah.
It's don't lose the game rather than going out and win the game. And listen, there's a lot of great teams that have won domestically a lot of titles, a lot of cups by having that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
But there has been signs lately of a little shift in that mentality. He's gone very strictly back now to back four. He seems to have ditched the back three. We saw in the last international games Bellingham playing as a number 10 basically, which really freed up Bellingham. I just do feel that he's almost got to the stage now, because I think if he doesn't win the Euros, I think he will go. If he wins, I think he will stay and do a World Cup. But I think it's almost last chance saloon of winning something with this squad.
I honestly think that this will be his last tournament. This will be his last tournament,
win or lose.
Yeah,
even if he goes and wins it.
No,
How can you get rid of a manager though who's just won a Euros and not give him a stab at the World Cup? No,
I don't think he'll get sacked. I think he'll go of his own. I think he'll go of his own volition. And I think there are signs that we're reaching the end of a cycle. With Gareth Southgate. And I think what Matt says is absolutely right. A willingness to go a little bit more attacking Bellingham as a 10 is just magnificent. But also in some of his actions off the pitch as well. When his defence is very staunch and actually quite emotional defence of Harry Maguire. And I was perplexed and bemused that there were some people in the media saying, "Oh, he shouldn't have said anything about Harry Maguire. He shouldn't have defended him like that." He's an England manager. We're crying out for England managers in the media to have a personality and be strong and provide back page headlines and pay, stuff that will fill the papers. Basically, so many England press conferences are dull and predictable, and not necessarily the fault of anybody, but they are. And here he is, absolutely going on the front foot and calling it on with people and saying it's a disgrace. And there's people within the media ranks going, "Oh, I don't think he should have said that."
I like it, and particularly given the Beckham documentary.
But what I think is that he's never done that before. Right. He's never really been as forceful and quite as emotional as before. And I think that suggests that
he's starting to lose it. Like
not lose it, but I think he's thinking, well, I'm coming to the end of my cycle. Right. I'm going to do this completely on my own terms.
Yeah, I think he's changed personality-wise. I really do. It might be a little bit subtle, but it really comes out to me. And I think it's post-World Cup. Yeah. I think he's saying that basically, I'm a bit like Matt. I think that basically if he does really well in the Euros, he'd struggle to not have the temptation to go on for another World Cup. I'm sure he's in his own mind committed to leaving after the Euros and thinks this is last chance saloon. But when it comes to it, let's see, because he's got such a great squad at his disposal. Yeah. But the point is, at the moment, in his head, he thinks this is my last chance. This is last chance saloon. I'm going to do it my way. Yeah. I'm fed up of basically saying the right thing and basically, saying what people want me to say, paying lip service. And he's suddenly become a little bit more brutal. He's suddenly become a little bit more, he's always been great with us.
He's sort of not the Mr. Nice Guy of old,
exactly.
Right?
He's feistier.
Just dropped that facade a little bit and basically gone, okay, I'm going to be a bit more stronger, a bit more ruthless.
He's changed his stance a bit, hasn't he? Because he always used to talk about picking informed players. And now he's kind of saying, he was talking about the recency effect, wasn't he? I don't want to be sort of
recency bias.
Recency bias,
exactly. Big psychology.
Yeah. I saw you on Twitter. Every time Ollie Watkins' name is mentioned, recency bias.
I've always had a slight problem with Southgate in that I think throughout his tenure, he has contradicted himself.
Yeah.
He's said things about certain rules on what he will pick players on. Yeah. For a long time it was, I won't pick players out of the Championship when we used to ask him about Jack Grealish. Then he picked Calvin Phillips before he'd ever played a Premier League game. Then it was players have got to be playing for their clubs. Then we had the whole Maguire thing. I don't blame him for it. I mean, I contradict myself all the time, I think, with no apologies for it.
Exactly,
people are allowed to contradict themselves, but he does contradict himself, and he will slightly back himself into corners by implying that there's a rule around selection or around his thought process, when in actual fact there aren't any. He's proved through his selections there aren't any. And what I find interesting about Southgate, which I think he's done, Paul would know far better than me, and Crossy to an extent with the amount of time they've covered England. I think he runs England like a club, not like a national team, which I think is completely different to how any other national manager has ever approached it. And he doesn't pick on form. No. He picks it like a club team.
Good travellers, good tourists.
Yeah. And where he has people who, if their form dips, if they've done it for him, they're still in, because it's like a club and a club squad rather than a national team where you're constantly picking on the ups and downs of players' club form.
And I think Maguire, I think that has been repaid to him by now. I mean, listen, I've been around so many England squads where the players are actually saying to their managers, "Can you tell the England manager I'm injured?" Because they don't want to join up. They never wanted to join up. Fergie was absolutely delighted if one of their players got a knock on a Saturday before an England game, because he could be straight on the phone to whatever England manager it was saying, oh, yeah, he's not coming. And if he didn't go, then it was so cliquey at the time. If, say, one player didn't go, the other players didn't really want to go because their mate
there was a bit of that, wasn't there?
Oh, there was a lot of that.
Harry Redknapp gave an interview once, didn't he, where he said, I've got players at Tottenham who used to come to me and say, tell the England manager I've got a knock, so don't want to join up.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Arsenal players with, Wenger is another one who was very happy not to see his players join up, and the least excuse, they would be pulled out and happy to be pulled out. Now, I don't see that now, and that goes to Matt's point, that it is very much a club mentality. It's a really tight-knit, supportive, unified dressing room. Yes, he'll have his own agendas and he'll have his own thinking, but he's absolutely the straightest England manager that I think we've had in a long, long time. Yeah. And I think he has been part of an England squad, certainly under Glenn Hoddle, where he was asked to mislead the press and, or Hoddle would deliberately be, I'm going to say, disingenuous, because I don't want to call him a liar. But the bottom line is, he would say, oh, no, he's injured, and just to try and put off the opposition. And Gareth has been part of that squad, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. We would speak to him in quiet moments around England squads, and he would say a lot in press conferences, a lot outside of a press conference that he couldn't say publicly. And he really, really disliked that mentality of half-truths, misguidance, that sort of thing. I think he's an England manager. I don't think he's ever, stand to be corrected, I don't think he's ever gone out of his way to put forward half-truths or misguidance or anything.
And this is the thing, when we're analysing whether he's over or underachieved, I think all of these things are important, because you've always got to say as well, who is the alternative? I know there's loads of fans out there going, Gareth Southgate's rubbish, his tactics are terrible, sack him. Who else are we going to have? So I think we have a golden generation. God, how many times are we going to say? We've got a good generation of players, right? We're top of the table, qualifying, unbeaten. I think Gareth Southgate is the best manager out there right now for this set of players. I can't think of another manager who I would prefer to have as an England manager right now. I mean, Pep Guardiola, fantastic, he'd be great. We're not going to be able to get him, but
I'm
which
not sure
available
Guardiola
manager
would be necessarily, because Guardiola's whole raison d'etre is every single day being in control of players, making these tactical tweaks, pushing them and moving them around, physically moving them around training pitches. I think Guardiola would go mad with that much downtime.
Yeah.
I don't think he could cope with it, because he is so feverishly obsessed every single day with the minute little decisions that you make to tweak and win football matches and make players better, change a mentality. I don't think he'd be suited to international football at all.
It's an impossible debate, because nobody would have sat here in 2016, and if I'd have sat here in front of you three and said that Southgate will be the second most successful ever England manager, and we're sitting here, you'd have laughed at me. I'd have laughed at you if you'd have said it, particularly you, John.
And it was only supposed to be a caretaker to begin with, right?
Exactly.
And he did so well that we couldn't overlook him.
You'd have never called it in a million years. So to try and then second guess who would make an exit, it's really, really tough. And it's actually also really tough to come up with what will happen with Southgate after England, because it's very hard to place at what level he'll be able to go back into the club game. Very difficult.
Martin Samuel wrote a piece in the Times the other day about trying to keep Gareth, once he is no longer the England manager, within the FA camp, and having him, dictate the process for the appointment of the next England manager, but also to have an overarching view of everything that you do from ground level up at the FA in terms of the national teams.
No, my prediction is that basically at some point he'll leave either 2024 or 2026. He'll try his I think he wants to go into club management at some point, but he won't last a year, and he'll be back within a year.
He won't last a year?
Well, I just think I'm not massively predicting that he's doomed to fail as such as that. Basically, I just think the lure will be too much, and that basically, however it's going, he'll be back at the FA as technical director.
So I suppose when we're having this debate, we've got to kind of think about who would be an alternative. I mean, I suppose Eddie Howe springs to mind.
Next manager of Saudi Arabia.
Does it have to be? Yeah. Does it have to be English though? Do you?
Yes. Has to be English.
I think so.
I have changed my mind dramatically because I was a great supporter of Sven-Göran Eriksson when he first got the job. But I'm very much in the camp of, the best of us against the best of I think the England manager I feel personally it has to be English. The Sarina Wiegman will prove that I'm an utter fool.
What about Sarina Wiegman? I know you've just said they need to be English, but if there was Emma Hayes, for example, what about could we have a woman managing England in the near future?
Not necessarily the near future, but I certainly listen. If Emma Hayes, if somebody asked me for a completely left field one and suggested Emma Hayes, I wouldn't ever disagree.
Yeah,
I think she's fantastic.
I convinced myself in Qatar when we thought that Southgate was going to go that it was going to be Pochettino or Tuchel for the England job then, because there wasn't an available English candidate. They couldn't have got Howe at the time. They couldn't have got Potter. And I really convinced myself that they were going to almost have to go for a foreign manager who they could try and justify being slightly anglicised by having worked in England before getting the England manager's job. And I still wonder whether that might end up being the case when we come round to it again, because the circumstances of where people are in their jobs is going to be a big one. At the moment you would say Howe would be a contender. You'd even say Potter would be a contender, but we don't know where they'll be in their careers at that time. And if they are at clubs who can challenge for the big four, gone are the days where a manager at a club in the top four who's at a certain point of his career is going to quit that job for the England manager's job. No chance.
I do think, for what it's worth, I do think it has to be an English manager for England. Yeah. Not because I'm all little England. I'm certainly not. I'm the absolute opposite of that. But basically, I just think if you are going to be committed to the St George's Park pathway and setup and system, then you have to have someone that gives every manager and every coach that goes through that pathway hope that the next manager has to come from that system and setup. And therefore, I think it'll probably be Eddie Howe or Graham Potter or someone like that.
They don't have to do now, though, is do what the FA have always done, is just do a 180-degree flip every time.
Yeah.
He's gone nice, friendly, everybody loves them, unsuccessable, disciplinarian. You go, he was too much of a disciplinarian. Come back to nice, cuddly, warm, fuzzy. I don't think they don't think that they need to do that now. I think there's a whole different mentality around the England camp, amongst England players, amongst the young players coming through, and I think Graham Potter would be ideal. I was a bit facetious about Eddie Howe, and I apologise, but I think he would be an ideal England manager.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. We're agreeing a bit too much, so let's just wrap this up, because I'm saying that we all think that he has overachieved as England manager, Gareth Southgate, which I think surprised me coming into this debate. You're obviously overachieved, right?
Yeah, I'm pro Gareth. Yeah, as I say, I do think he's overachieved in the main, but I think underachieved in the three key games, which ultimately will define him. But I think very much pro Gareth. I think when we look back in years to come, I think we'll say what an amazing job, what an amazing time we had under Gareth Southgate.
And we'll be wearing our Gareth Southgate waistcoats, won't we, Matt?
He doesn't wear them anymore. He ditched them after Russia, didn't he? Has he worn one since Russia?
I did see him. I thought he wore something similar the other day,
he
but
has
not in the style of...
It's gone cardy, isn't he?
Yeah. So I'm not I'm sorry, but I'm not overachieve or underachieve. Right. A bit like Paul, I'm more on the achieve. I don't think you can say he's overachieved when he hasn't won anything. Yeah,
it's a tricky one, isn't it? I guess the Euros was the closest, the final against Italy. So you're very much in the middle as well.
Yeah, I think I said earlier 7.5, 8 out of 10, which might sound like damning him with faint praise. But I've seen England managers who are only rated 2 or 3 out of 10. So he's ahead of the curve, shall we say? Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how long we get to have Gareth Southgate at the helm. That's all we've got time for. Thanks so much, guys, for all your stories. This is High Press, brought to you by William Hill in partnership with the Football Writers Association. Don't forget to subscribe for your weekly episodes. 18+, please gamble responsibly.